It started like any other small-town marriage, tight budget, long hours, quiet nights. We weren't rich, but we had enough. Or so I thought. Life has a way of testing you when you least expect it. One accident changed everything. I was in a wheelchair and couldn't work. But it wasn't the end. My wife cheated on me, and then she left. Curtain. They say whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That's exactly what happened to me. I clawed my way out of that mess, and I didn't just get out. I came back big. And believe me, when my ex-wife saw me 4 years after the divorce, she regretted everything more than anything in her life. She begged for a second chance. But I said the words that silenced her forever. And life? It gave her gifts you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. This is the story of how I rose from the ashes, while my ex reaped the rewards of every treacherous choice she made. Let's start at the beginning. I was 36, and she was 27. We had already been living together, married, in a modest 2-bedroom apartment for 5 years. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Carpet was old. Fridge made a weird noise every 20 minutes like it had indigestion. We had hand-me-down furniture from my aunt and a couch that slouched more than it sat. But I was proud of it. I worked long days, 10 to 12 hours sometimes, at a plastics plant just off the highway. I ran one of the injection molding machines. Hot, greasy work, loud as hell, and smelled like burnt rubber and melted crayons. But it was steady. It paid enough to keep the lights on, food in the fridge, and occasionally order pizza on Friday nights. Not a bad life, if you ask me. Amber didn't work. Said she was between passions. That was her phrase. She'd tried a few things, makeup tutorials on YouTube, dog grooming from the living room, a little photography business that lasted about a month. But nothing ever stuck. She'd lose interest fast or blame someone else for why it didn't work out. Still, I didn't complain much. I figured if I worked, she could handle the house. She'd cook sometimes, clean sometimes. Laundry got done, eventually. Most days, I'd come home tired, grab a cold soda, sit on the porch for a few minutes, and try not to think about the pain in my back or the noise in my head from 12 hours of machinery. Amber would usually be inside, watching shows or scrolling on her phone. Sometimes she'd grunt a hello when I came in. Other times, nothing. We weren't exactly lovey-dovey. After the first year of marriage, she stopped holding my hand while walking. Didn't say goodnight some nights. But again, I told myself we were just tired, just busy. That's how long-term relationships get, right? Her mood could change like the weather in Indiana, sunny 1 minute, storming the next. There were days she'd make pancakes and laugh at old sitcoms with me. Other days, she'd look at me like I was a stranger who wandered into her house and she was debating whether to call the cops or not. She had this way of twisting words too, like if I asked why the rent check hadn't been mailed yet, somehow that meant I was accusing her of stealing. She once told me I was emotionally abusive for asking her not to yell at me in public. I remember standing in the Kroger parking lot, holding a bag of oranges, wondering what the hell just happened. But I stayed. I guess I believed that being a man meant sticking it out, providing, being patient. I grew up watching my mom care for my dad after his back gave out. She never left, never complained either. So I figured I could do the same. I didn't marry her to give up when it got tough. I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd grow into herself, find the thing she was passionate about. Maybe the stress would fade, and we'd settle into something warm and steady. That hope kept me going. We weren't rich, not by a long shot. Our idea of a fancy date night was drive-through burgers and a Redbox movie. Vacations were day trips to Brown County or fishing at her uncle's cabin. But we had routines. Tuesday was taco night. Sunday, I watched the Colts and she half-watched while playing games on her phone. There was comfort in that, even if it wasn't exciting. I didn't need grand gestures. I just wanted peace, and someone who had my back. But I realize now, looking back, that Amber was never really in it for that. She liked the idea of being married, being taken care of, but she didn't want the weight that came with it. She didn't want to be a partner, she wanted a pedestal. And the minute things weren't exactly how she pictured, she blamed me. I'd wake up at 4:30 a.m. every morning, muscles aching, head pounding, and I'd look over at her still sleeping like the world owed her rest. I'd put on my steel toe boots, grab my thermos, and walk out the door knowing the next 12 hours would eat me alive. But I did it. For us. Turns out, I was the only one doing anything for us. And at the time, I didn't even realize that everything was already starting to fall apart. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I always brought leftover meatloaf on Tuesdays, and I was looking forward to lunch. I never got to eat it. We'd been short-staffed for weeks at the plant, So they asked me to work up on the scaffolding to help with some maintenance above the main line. I'd done it before. No big deal. I wasn't scared of heights or anything, but I never liked being off the ground. Something about not having solid concrete under my boots always made me feel twitchy. But I didn't say no. Overtime meant more in the paycheck, and we needed every dime. I was up there with a guy named Larry, tightening bolts on a support pipe when I heard this crack. Not loud, not like in the movies. Just a dry, quick snap, like a twig breaking in your hand. Then I felt the whole damn thing shift under me. I don't remember falling. Not really. It was just one of those instant before you know it things. 1 second I was reaching for a wrench, and the next I was on the ground with people shouting and everything going kind of fuzzy. My legs were twisted weird. I didn't feel pain at first, just heat, like someone poured boiling water down from my waist. The ambulance took 10 minutes. 10 of the longest minutes I've ever lived through. I kept trying to sit up, but someone, maybe Larry, was holding me down, telling me to stay still. My legs were busted up bad. Later they told me I'd fractured both femurs, crushed my left kneecap, and had some nerve damage running through both thighs. There were metal rods in both legs before I even woke up in the hospital. The first few days were a blur. I was in and out of surgery, full of meds that made me feel like I was floating above the bed. Amber showed up on day 2. She looked more annoyed than scared. Said the hospital smelled bad. Sat in the corner on her phone mostly. Barely touched me, didn't ask the nurses much. Just sat there with her arms crossed, like it was some inconvenience. When the doctors finally talked to me straight, they said it plain. I might never walk again. Maybe with enough rehab and therapy, I'd be able to stand or hobble with a walker, but a lot of people in my condition didn't recover full mobility. At best, I'd be in a wheelchair for a year, maybe longer. At worst, the chair would be permanent. I spent a lot of time in the hospital. When I came home, everything was different. Getting from the front door to the kitchen was a whole operation. Amber helped at first. She cooked some basic meals, though most of them were frozen or microwaved. She ran to the pharmacy to pick up my prescriptions. She complained a lot, though. About how heavy the wheelchair was, about how the house smelled like medicine now, about how I used to be strong. The medical bills came rolling in not long after. Insurance covered the surgeries, but physical therapy? Equipment? Follow-up visits? Nah. Most of that came out of our pocket. I wasn't working anymore, and my short-term disability pay was barely enough to cover rent and power. We started selling stuff. First to go was the TV, our decent 50-inch flat screen I'd gotten during a Black Friday sale. Then the stove, which we swapped out for a hot plate. I watched as the living room got barer by the week. The recliner went next, then the small bookshelf, and eventually, the coffee table. Pawn shops and Facebook Marketplace became regular words in our conversations. We held on to the basics, but barely. The laptop stayed, my old Dell, the one I used to watch games and check emails. It was kind of a piece of junk, missing 2 keys, and the battery didn't last long, but it still worked when plugged in. Amber used it more than me, mostly to watch those trashy drama shows or scroll through Facebook groups she never posted in. She also got real stingy about food. We used to keep a decent pantry, but after a while, I was down to eating oatmeal, ramen, and whatever canned stuff we had. She started buying weird bulk items, dried beans, plain rice, canned tuna. Said it was efficient. Amber wasn't around much anymore either. She'd go out, say she was doing errands, or looking for side gigs. Sometimes she said she was helping her cousin move. I didn't ask too many questions. What could I do? I couldn't even get out the front door by myself. Every time I asked where she was going, she'd snap back with something like, "Why? You gonna follow me?" and roll her eyes. I felt useless. I couldn't help but think I was dragging us both down. Like I'd become this anchor tied to her ankle. I wanted to get better. I really did. I was doing my stretches, trying to eat right, reading online about physical therapy routines. But progress was slow. My legs felt like sandbags, and my arms ached constantly from wheeling myself around. One night, I asked her if she could just sit with me for a bit, watch something together, maybe talk. She sighed so hard it echoed, plopped down next to me, stared at her phone, and said, "We already spend all day together. What more do you want?" I just nodded. What was the point in arguing? I didn't recognize her anymore. I started keeping notes in a notebook by my side. Dumb stuff at first, what pills I took, how much water I drank, which exercises I tried. But then I started writing down when she left, when she came home, what she said. I wasn't sure why. Maybe I was looking for a pattern, or maybe it was just something to do. but it helped me feel a little more in control. The days dragged on. I'd sit by the window, watching people walk their dogs, jog, carry groceries. Normal stuff. Stuff I used to do without thinking. I'd press my hand to my thigh and try to will it to twitch. Nothing. Just dead weight. Amber kept disappearing for longer stretches. At first, it was an hour. Then 2. Then she'd be gone most of the evening. She always had an excuse. Someone needed help. A friend had a crisis. She was checking out job leads. I wanted to believe her. But something felt off. And through all of it, I stayed quiet. Because deep down, I still thought this was just a rough patch. A test. Something we'd eventually come out of stronger. I didn't realize it then, but I was holding on to a version of Amber that hadn't existed for a long time. And while I was fighting to heal, to find a way back to myself, she was already gone. It started with a bag of groceries. I was sitting on the couch, the place I rarely left anymore, flipping through some old sports articles on the busted laptop when Amber came through the front door. Her arms were full, paper bags crinkling, something clinking inside, and the smell of real food hit me before I even looked up. Meat. Cheese. A box of Honey Nut Cheerios, not the off-brand stuff we'd been buying. A few cans of soup, and even a small bottle of decent coffee creamer. Not the powder kind. The kind we hadn't had since everything went downhill. She dropped the bags on the counter like it was nothing and said, "Got a job." Just like that. I blinked. A job. Yeah, she said, pulling out a package of ground beef. Night shift. Part-time. Pays cash. I just sat there, mouth probably hanging open like an idiot. For weeks, we'd been pawning off furniture and arguing about which bills could be pushed to next month. Suddenly, she was unloading fresh groceries like we were back in better times. What kind of job? I asked. She shrugged. Cleaning. And sometimes serving. It's kind of mixed. Small place. Downtown. That was all she said. No company name. No uniform. No details. But I didn't push it. At the time, I was too relieved. I thanked her, even told her how proud I was. She didn't respond to that. That night was the first of many. She got dressed, jeans and a black top, and left around 6:30. Said she'd be back, late, maybe around 2 or 3 a.m. I stayed up until about midnight, watching old reruns and playing solitaire on the laptop, but my eyelids got heavy, and I dozed off in my chair. She came back just before sunrise. I know because the sound of her keys woke me up. She tried to be quiet, but our door always creaked no matter how you turned the knob. I looked over and saw her slipping off her shoes. Her hair was a little messy, and she moved like she was walking through molasses, slow and sluggish, like every bone in her body ached. "Hey," I said, my voice still half asleep. She jumped slightly, didn't expect me to be awake. "Didn't mean to wake you," she muttered, avoiding eye contact as she headed to the bathroom. She smelled different. Not bad, just off. Something like cheap perfume, with a whiff of vodka or maybe some fruity drink. I figured maybe she'd had a drink after her shift, nothing illegal about that, but something about it stuck in my brain. The next morning, I asked her how her shift went. "Busy," she said. "People are pigs. You'd think grown adults could throw their trash away." I nodded. "So it's a cleaning job, mostly?" "Sometimes. Depends on the night. They got me helping in the back, too. It's flexible." Then she pulled out a roll of cash from her purse and placed a couple of 20s on the table. "For groceries or whatever," she said, and walked into the bedroom. I stared at the bills. It was more money than we'd had in the house in weeks. I should have felt grateful. And I did. But I also felt something else, something I couldn't name right away. Like a loose thread had been tugged, and if I pulled too hard, the whole thing might unravel. From that point on, Amber was gone most nights. At first, I didn't question it. I told myself she was finally stepping up, trying to support us, and that she was allowed to be tired. But then her stories started to get weird. One night she came home wearing different shoes. I asked about it, and she said she spilled something on her old ones and borrowed a coworker's pair. Another night, she told me she worked at a bar. "Nothing big," she said. "Just wiping tables and stocking napkins." Later that week, she said she was catering weddings. Then it was a call center that did night shifts. One time, she even said she was helping a friend set up an event. It didn't add up. Not the hours. Not the pay. Not the way she'd get defensive if I asked more than 1 or 2 questions. "You think I'm lying or something?" she snapped one night while pulling on her coat. "No," I said, trying to stay calm. "I just want to know you're safe. That's all. I can handle myself," she said, and slammed the door on her way out. The part that messed with me the most was how good things looked on the outside. She was bringing in enough money for real food again. We could afford all my medications without skipping doses. And yet, I felt more alone than ever. When she was home, she was distant. Short answers. Always on her phone. She didn't sit with me during meals. She didn't talk unless she had to. If I asked her how she was doing, she'd say, "Fine," and leave the room. I started to wonder if I'd done something wrong. If me getting hurt had somehow turned me into this thing she had to drag behind her. The change in her wasn't just in behavior. It was her eyes. They didn't soften anymore when she looked at me. They were cold, calculating, like she was always somewhere else. I'd ask if she wanted to watch a movie or just sit on the porch like we used to. She'd shrug and say, "Maybe tomorrow," then disappear for another shift. And the weirdest thing was that she always looked put together. Even late at night. She started putting on makeup before leaving. Wore perfume. Did her hair. None of that was part of her routine when we were broke and eating instant noodles. But now she was glamming up for cleaning jobs and bartending gigs. I wanted to believe her. God knows I tried. I didn't want to be that guy, the suspicious husband who interrogates his wife every time she leaves the house. But my gut kept gnawing at me. Something didn't feel right. Still, what could I do? I was stuck in a chair. I couldn't drive. I couldn't follow her. I couldn't even roll myself down the front steps without help. The idea of playing detective felt like a joke. The most I could do was sit there in that empty apartment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the old wall clock, waiting for her to come home. And every night, I waited. And every night, I wondered, where was she really going? What kind of job was she doing that changed her so much? Why did she stop looking at me like I mattered? I didn't have the answers yet. Just questions that kept piling up. And a gut feeling that the Amber I once knew had disappeared. Amber told me one morning she had to go out of town for a few days. Business trip, she said casually, like she'd said it a dozen times before. It caught me off guard, because I didn't even know what job she supposedly had at that point. Last I heard, she was helping organize events. Or was it bartending? Or something with catering? The stories had blurred together by then. Still, I didn't argue. She packed a duffel bag, made me a batch of chili, actually good chili, better than her usual cooking, and put some sandwiches in the fridge. "So you don't starve," she said with a smile that didn't quite touch her eyes. Before she left, she leaned down, kissed me on the forehead like I was a child, and said, "Be good." Then she was gone. The apartment felt even quieter than usual without her. I sat in my chair by the window for a while, just watching the trees across the street bend in the wind. That evening, bored out of my mind, I powered up the old laptop. I hadn't used it in weeks. It was more a thing now. I figured I'd watch some old crime dramas, something to kill time. After a few viewings, I broke for dinner and turned off my laptop. When I came back, I decided to find the old video and went to the browser history. I found an interesting link at the very end of the search page. casualencountersnow.com. I blinked at it, confused for a second. It sounded like some kind of dating site. Maybe one of those where folks look for, let's just say, very casual company. Curiosity got the better of me. I clicked the link. The site loaded fast, and right there, in the login box, her email was pre-filled. I hit enter. No password required. She must have checked the Keep Me Signed In box. And that's when my stomach dropped. Her profile popped up immediately. Username, MidwestFire33445. It had one photo, blurry, low quality, taken in a mirror. She wasn't showing her face, but the body was unmistakably hers. Same build. There was a short bio underneath. Something vague like, looking for generous, open-minded people. Let's keep things simple and fun. I just sat there, staring at the screen. For a long while, I didn't move. I didn't blink. My hands hovered over the keys like I'd forgotten what I was doing. I told myself maybe it was a joke. Maybe someone was catfishing using her photo. But I knew better. The way the room behind her looked in that photo, it was our bathroom. The old shower curtain, the scratch on the mirror's corner. She hadn't even tried to hide it. I clicked around the profile. There were messages. A lot of them. Some unopened. Some opened. Men asking if she was available tonight, saying they had money, that they were in town. She didn't reply to all of them, but enough. It was like my stomach had turned to ice. I felt this cold crawl up my spine and settle between my shoulder blades. My face was hot, though. Like I was embarrassed in my own damn home, with no one watching. I didn't even know what to think. I wasn't angry yet. Not really. Just stunned. Numb. She had lied about the job, lied about the money, lied every night when she said she was working late or covering shifts or doing something for her friend. All those different stories, all those nights coming home tired, reeking of perfume and whatever she'd been drinking. It all made sense now. The way she avoided my eyes when I asked simple questions. How she got dressed up just to go clean a venue or serve drinks to strangers. And the worst part? I believed her. I wanted to. I told myself over and over that she was just doing what she had to do for us. That maybe things were getting better. Turns out, she was just getting better at hiding it. I sat back in the chair and stared at the wall. My legs felt heavier than ever. I couldn't go after her. Couldn't walk out the door and confront her. Couldn't even stand up and pace like a normal person dealing with a life falling apart. I looked around the apartment. Same cracked wall. Same flickering kitchen light. Same empty chair across from mine where she used to sit. All of it suddenly felt different. Like it belonged to someone else. I just sat there, listening to the clock tick and the refrigerator hum, and tried to figure out when everything had started to rot. Because it was clear now, this wasn't a job. It was a choice. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there in my chair, staring at the laptop like it might change if I looked long enough. But it didn't. Her picture was still there. Her messages. The little green dot showing she was online now. I stared at that dot for hours. By morning, I knew I needed help. Not just a vent. I needed someone who could do something. So I called Cody. Cody and I go way back. We worked at the same plant for years until he moved over to maintenance. But his wife, Megan, used to be friends with Amber, which complicated things. I didn't want Megan getting wind of what I was doing, not yet. I needed this kept quiet until I had something solid. Cody understood right away. He didn't ask dumb questions or try to soften the blow. He just said, "All right, man. I've got a guy who might be able to help." Enter Sean. Sean wasn't exactly a private investigator or anything official, but he'd helped Cody once before with some shady business involving a rental scam. Sean was one of those guys who just knew how to move in the gray areas. Tall, clean-cut, sharp dresser. He had a calm voice, nothing flashy about him, but he gave off the kind of energy that made people want to talk. I explained the situation. Told him I'd found Amber's dating profile. Told him I needed to be sure, needed to see it with my own eyes. Not guesses. Not suspicions. Proof. Sean didn't blink. "Send me her username," he said. "I'll take care of it." He set up a burner profile, one of those fake accounts with a generic name and a profile picture pulled off a stock image site. He messaged her. She replied in 7 minutes. They chatted back and forth for a bit. She flirted lightly at first, then got more forward. She asked if he was generous, what he was looking for, and how discreet he could be. He told her he was visiting from out of town and had a hotel room near the highway. She said she could be there that evening. It was like watching a bad movie I didn't want to believe was real. Sean kept me updated in real time. Sent me screenshots. She even sent him another photo, not of her face, but enough to confirm what I already knew. We made a plan. Sean would meet her at the hotel, room already booked under a name she didn't recognize. He wore a small hidden camera clipped inside the collar of his jacket. Cody helped set it up with an old dash cam rig he had lying around. We tested it earlier that day. Sound was clear. Video decent enough in low light. I was at home the whole time, watching the clock tick down like I was waiting for a bomb to go off. Amber texted me around 6:40 p.m., working late. "Don't wait up." Sean got to the hotel a bit before 8 o'clock. He said she knocked exactly on time. Said she looked polished, confident, like she'd done this 100 times. Not nervous. Not awkward. Just business. She came in, laughed a little, sat on the bed like it was nothing. Told him she didn't have much time, but enough. Sean kept it casual. Asked her about herself, where she was from, what she liked to do. That's when she started talking. "Oh, I'm just trying to make ends meet," she said with a chuckle. "My husband's a sweet guy, but, well, he's not really a man anymore, you know? Had an accident, can't walk. I do what I have to." Sean kept her talking. She joked, said she deserved a little fun. She mentioned how she was glad to meet someone normal for once. She laughed again. He said she leaned in close, touched his arm, and gave a little smirk when she said, "He's basically furniture now." That one hit hard. Sean let it go a few more minutes, then faked a turn. Clutched his stomach, said he wasn't feeling right, probably food poisoning. She looked annoyed but didn't argue. Picked up her purse, said maybe another time, and left. He got it all. Video. Audio. Clear as day. Back at home, Cody came over and helped transfer the footage to my laptop. We sat there in silence as the video played. There she was, sitting on that hotel bed, laughing, talking about me like I was just some burden she carried around, making jokes like she hadn't stood in front of a preacher and promised to stick with me through anything. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was how easy it seemed for her. Like I was already a ghost to her. Like I didn't even matter anymore. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there with my hands folded in my lap, staring at the screen. The only thing I felt was the shift, like something inside me had broken loose, finally untethered. This wasn't a suspicion anymore. This was proof. Amber got back 2 days later, just before noon. I heard the key in the door and the slow creak as it opened. She walked in like it was any other day. Same old routine. Dropped her purse on the kitchen table, stretched her arms like she'd had a long drive, and kicked off her shoes. She smelled like gin and hotel soap, one of those strong, floral ones they use in budget places trying to seem fancy. Her hair was damp, and she had that look like she'd just rolled through 3 days without much care. But she still managed to act like nothing was wrong. I was sitting in my chair, facing the door, waiting. She didn't even glance my way at first. "Hey," she said flatly. "Food's in the bag." She pointed toward a brown takeout bag on the counter. "Figured you'd be hungry." I didn't move. She finally noticed the look on my face. "What?" she said, raising an eyebrow like I was the one being strange. "I know," I said. She paused. "Know what?" "I know where you were. I know what you've been doing." That got her attention. Her shoulders straightened a bit, but she didn't look surprised. Just irritated. Like I was inconveniencing her with this conversation. "I saw your profile," I said. "Casual encounters now. I saw the messages. I saw everything." She didn't even flinch. I wheeled myself over to the table where the laptop was already open. I hit play. The video clip was short, just under a minute. Enough to catch her voice, her laugh, the way she leaned in and said those words. "My husband's a sweet guy, but, well, he's not really a man anymore, you know?" She stood still, arms crossed. When the clip ended, I looked up at her, waiting for something. A denial. An apology. Maybe even just a little shame. Instead, she shrugged. And then she said it. Well, what was I supposed to do? We were broke. You couldn't even walk. That knocked the air out of me harder than the fall at the factory. I stared at her, speechless. Not because I didn't have words, but because none of them seemed big enough to match what I was feeling. Hurt didn't cover it. Anger didn't either. It was betrayal, plain and simple, delivered with the same tone you'd use to complain about bad weather. "I gave everything I had," I finally said. "And this is what you think I deserve?" She scoffed, loud and sharp. "I was done playing nurse anyway," she snapped. "You think I wanted to be stuck in this apartment with a crippled husband and a pile of bills?" I pulled the envelope out from under the cushion next to me, thick with papers. I had filled out every page over the last day, my signature shaky but clear. "I'm divorcing you," I said, tossing the envelope toward her. It hit her chest and slid down onto the floor. She didn't even bend to pick it up. "Good," she said, grabbing her purse again. "For God's sake," finally. I rolled back to the table, grabbed the laptop, and before I could second-guess it, I raised it and slammed it against the wall. Plastic and wires burst in every direction. She rolled her eyes. "You're so dramatic," she muttered, stepping over the broken mess. And just like that, she walked out the door. No tears. No fight. No looking back. She didn't even close the door behind her. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd ever felt. It wasn't just the absence of her footsteps. It was the hollow echo of the years I'd spent trying to build something with someone who clearly never cared the same way. I sat there for a long while, just staring at the broken remains of the laptop. That thing had been the last bit of normal I had, and now it was shattered just like everything else. But the truth was, it had already been broken for a long time. That was the last time I saw her for a while. And in that moment, I didn't care where she went. Because finally, she was gone. The divorce went through quicker than I thought it would. No shouting matches, no court drama. Just papers, signatures, and a judge's stamp. We didn't have kids, and we sure didn't have anything worth fighting over by then. The apartment was mine before we got married, and most of what we owned had already been sold or broken. The only thing left to divide was the silence. She didn't contest anything, just wrote down a forwarding address to some rental on the other side of town and disappeared. I didn't chase. I didn't call. I didn't even look her up. She had made her choice. I was busy trying to survive mine. With her gone, I could finally focus on getting myself back together. First step was rehab. It was slow going, but I showed up every day. Some days I hated it. Some days I hurt so bad I thought about quitting. But I didn't. I'd been knocked down before. I wasn't about to stay there. That's where I met Tyrone. He was a big guy, ex-Marine, busted up in a car wreck. Crushed hip, broken ribs, a shoulder that didn't move right anymore. But he smiled through it all, cracking jokes with the nurses and pushing every rep like it was his last. We got to talking during our sessions, and one day, while we were resting between sets, he asked what I used to do. Factory, I said. Plastic molds. Long shifts, loud machines. He nodded. Same grind I was in before I joined up, he said. You ever think about selling stuff online? I looked at him sideways. Like what? Anything, he said. Electronics, tools, parts. Folks buy everything off the internet now. I started flipping old phones from eBay. Made a few grand in a month. I was skeptical, but I had time and nothing to lose. So Tyrone helped me set up an account. We started small, buying broken routers, refurbishing them, and selling them back for a profit. I'd sit at my kitchen table with tools spread out in front of me, watching videos and figuring out how things worked. At first, it was clumsy. I cracked more cases than I fixed. But I got better. Fast. I started learning the rhythms of the business. How to price, how to ship, how to talk to customers. I watched trends, found out what moved fast. When routers slowed down, I switched to phone accessories. Then smartwatches, Bluetooth speakers. Whatever was hot, I'd find a way to get my hands on it. Tyrone and I teamed up. He handled sourcing. I handled listings and customer support. We reinvested every penny into better stock. Eventually, we hired a couple of folks to help with packaging and returns. Things took off. We got into drop shipping, stuff that we never even touched. Orders came in, suppliers fulfilled them, and we kept the margin. Then we launched a private label. Custom-branded gaming chairs with my logo stitched on the headrest. Adjustable desks. Smart home gear. My living room turned into a warehouse. Then we got an actual warehouse. Money started coming in. Not in piles, not all at once, but steady. My wheelchair was gathering dust in the corner. I was walking again. A cane at first, then braces. Eventually, just my own 2 legs, slow but strong. I moved out of the apartment and bought a house. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, with a small yard out back and a front porch where I could finally sit and enjoy a cup of coffee without hearing traffic or neighbors fighting through the walls. I got a Mustang too, cherry red, the kind I used to dream about when I was a teenager. I hired a personal trainer, got into shape, bought better clothes, ate better food. Life started looking like something out of a movie, but it wasn't about showing off. It was about proving to myself that I wasn't finished. For years after Amber walked out, I barely recognized my own reflection. The broken man in the wheelchair who lived on instant noodles and silence was gone. What replaced him was someone who built something from nothing. And for the first time in a long time, I felt proud. Not just because I had money or stuff, but because I had done it myself. No help. No shortcuts. No one dragging me down. I wasn't just standing again. I was rising. It was mid-July, one of those days where the heat hangs in the air like it's trying to choke you. I'd just wrapped up a brutal gym session. My shirt clung to my back, sweat dripping into my eyes as I walked into the locker room to grab my towel. Same spot I always left it. Familiar routine. But this time, something was off. I turned the corner, and there she was. Amber. She was standing near the mirror, sipping from a water bottle. Pale blue tank, black leggings, hair tied up the way she used to when she was lounging around at home. Her posture shifted the second she saw me. She froze. I watched her eyes widen and her face go pale, like she'd seen a ghost. Her lips parted just slightly. Oh my God, you look, well. I didn't respond. Just grabbed my towel and started wiping the sweat from my face, slow and calm. She stared at me like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. I didn't blame her. That man she walked out on didn't exist anymore. I just want to say I'm sorry, she said, taking a cautious step forward. I only did what I thought I had to. Back then, we were drowning. I didn't see another way. She looked different. Thinner, more tired. Like the years hadn't been kind to her. But those same eyes, they hadn't changed. Still trying to talk circles around the truth. I loved you. I still do. I think about you more than I should. Seeing you here, like this, it's unbelievable. How did you become like this? I finally spoke. Work. She blinked, confused. Work. I repeated. The same thing I did before you walked out. Except this time, I did it for me. I walked past her without saying anything else. She didn't follow, not yet. But I could feel her eyes trailing me all the way out. Outside, the heat smacked me in the face as I stepped into the sunlight. I walked toward the parking lot, threw my gym bag in the trunk, and slid into my Mustang, the kind of car I used to just dream about when we were pawning off furniture. I fired up the engine and took off. She followed. I didn't notice right away. But a couple minutes into the drive, I saw her beat-up sedan 2 cars back in the rearview. I could have lost her easy. One wrong turn and she'd have no idea where I lived now. But I let her follow. Let her see. She pulled up right after me, parked awkwardly behind my driveway. Her eyes were wide as she took in the house, 2-story brick, white trim, clean yard. A place with pride in it. I didn't invite her in. Just stood there at the front step, arms crossed. She got out of the car slowly. Walked up the sidewalk like she was approaching a cliff. I can't believe this, she said quietly. Is this your place? Yep. She looked around again. It's beautiful. I mean, I don't understand. How did this happen? Like I said, I replied, work. She paused. Can we talk? Please. I shrugged. You're talking. I made mistakes. I know that. But I was scared. I was tired. I was young and dumb and selfish. I didn't think you'd make it. I didn't think I could either. She looked at me, pleading. I'm not asking to rewind time. I'm just asking for a second chance. I took a step forward, looked her dead in the eyes, and said it plain. I don't give second chances. You're expendable now. Her jaw dropped slightly. She stepped back like the words had pushed her. You don't mean that, she whispered. I didn't answer. She wiped at her eye with the back of her hand, then her voice cracked. I got something. From that time in my life. Something I can't get rid of. I don't want to be alone. I didn't flinch. Didn't soften. Then maybe you should have thought about that when I was laying in that apartment, half a man in a wheelchair, and you were out there selling pieces of yourself for cash. She didn't reply. Just stood there. The porch light clicked on as the sun dipped lower. I turned the knob, opened the front door, and paused. If you think I ever waited for you to come back, you're wrong. I didn't just survive you, Amber. I outgrew you. And with that, I stepped inside and shut the door behind me. No dramatic slam. No parting words. Just silence. And this time, it was mine. Share your thoughts in the comments. Would you forgive a wife who cheated on you for the well-being of the whole family? If you liked the story, subscribe to the channel and give us a like.